and welcome to the latest edition of the Leadership Untitled podcast, the show that helps leaders, whether you're aspiring leaders and first-time leaders, or senior CEOs or board members, hopefully with lots of hints and tips through stories from my guests, where we share mistakes and also successes that we've had along the way. My guest this week is Mike Bedford. He's the director and founder of Be Brilliant People Development and also the podcaster of the Be Brilliant People podcast. So please welcome Mike as he joins me on what is a mashup of the two podcasts today, in two installments also, in what I thought might have been a bit of a risky move. Two presenters talking to each other. However, it turns into a really valuable, almost devil's advocate style conversation around all things work, what work is, where the hybrid working's actually working for people, what that actually means. See what you think and let us know.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to a joint podcast today. So we've got the Be Brilliant People podcast, and I've also got Rob Moores joining in partnership with me today from the Leadership Untitled podcast as well. So hi Rob, and welcome to our joint podcast today.
And welcome to you too, Mike. And I just mentioned to you that I've got a bit of a cold today, so don't encourage me to say be brilliant too many times, else the bees will slowly degrade over time.
There's going to be lots of bees.
Well.
Yeah, so we may get to hear your cold voice quite a bit during this conversation. And we were just chatting, funnily enough, weren't we, about kind of the unscripted brilliance of kind of our podcast as well. And we don't really have a plan. This has been, the plan has been to actually get us together, right? For some time.
Exactly.
And you know, life has a habit of kind of getting in the way of things that you want to do, doesn't it? But finally we got together. We were just kind of, before we came on air, just talking about how we don't have a plan, but actually the beauty and the nature of podcasts and podcasting is that conversation, isn't it? That genuine conversation between two people.
Absolutely. I mean, conversations, there's something authentic about it, because a lot of the coaching, certainly a lot of the workshops that I do and facilitate are all about the power of conversation. Whether that's coaching conversations, whether that's just actually, let's not call it coaching, let's just talk with people and listen to people and ask them questions, be genuinely interested in them. So I just find it a lot more authentic when the likes of yourself and myself as coaches, and obviously some of the mutual contacts we've got who are also coaches who run their own podcasts. There's something more authentic about it if it's not scripted, if it's not there with like a target or an aim. I mean, quite often I might have a pre-chat, and whilst we've not had a pre-chat about the podcast episode per se, we've chatted quite a few times about loads of different things.
Yeah.
You get a feel for what might be covered. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what is, as long as there's a value to the listener and you enjoy the conversation.
No, exactly. When today, the beauty of us linking up is we're putting a different type of content out to both our listener base as well. You know, we've both kind of been doing podcasting for a little while now, and we've both got our own kind of style and take, and we've had similar but different guests on and kind of different approaches and things like that. So I think we both kind of we toyed with the idea of kind of mashing up, for want of a better word, some time ago, and we kind of didn't know whether it would work, and we looked at different options, and then, you know, we just decided, what the hell, just let's kind of go with it and see what happens. And for me, that kind of, I just love that kind of unpredictability and that kind of just let's see what happens type approach as well. Exactly
that, mate. People will vote with their feet or their hands or their ears or whatever they vote with. They can listen, or they'll get back to us and say, that was rubbish, you two. Can you do something different, please?
Yeah, definitely. Other podcasts are available for sure, but you know, don't you know, implore you stick with it and kind of listen to our conversation, and if it adds value to you and you think it's a good conversation, then that's great. And if it doesn't, you know what, that's great too. Maybe just for the benefit, you know, some of my listeners, Rob, might not kind of know too much about you and what you do, and likewise we can flip that around as well. But for the benefit of kind of our general audience, I guess, could you just maybe tell us a little bit about who the hell's this Rob Moores guy, and kind of what does he do and why is he here?
Absolutely. I mean, plenty of my listeners might not know what I do as well, because I'm normally just talking to the other person about what they do.
There you go. You see, flipping it around again.
There you go. They'll learn something. So yeah, I'm Rob Moores. I've been in learning and development for about 20. What year are we in now? Pandemic included, 22 years. And that's pretty much been my life. But for the last, I would say, 6 to 7 years, a lot more of that has revolved around leadership and coaching. Basically, from the point that when I was first in charge of a team myself, that was probably, well, the first 2 or 3 months of it was so stressful for me that I thought something had to change. And weirdly, I'd been seconded and looking after that team for the best part of a year beforehand, and I was absolutely fine with it. It was that moment that now it's your job. Now it's you. You're not babysitting anymore, for want of a better phrase. It's yours.
Yeah.
So that's what I do now. I kind of coach through 2 specialisms, one being around the leadership kind of narrative per se. The other is learning and development leaders. I tend to coach quite a lot. And that's the core thing that I love doing. Those, again, power of conversation.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm curious. I was going to say I had a question off the back of that, Rob.
Oh no, not a question.
I know.
Anyone think you were a coach?
Two coaches talking together. I mean, how does that even work? 2 coaches trying to have a conversation.
No answers today, just questions.
Just lots of questions bouncing backwards, a bit like ping pong, but questions.
Yeah.
I'm curious because obviously my show is very much kind of very people focused, very kind of exploring kind of how people are feeling and the mindset and the well-being and all of those really important things. I'm just curious off the back of what you just said there. I heard you saying about kind of that you kind of felt you got to a point where you were feeling really kind of stressed in what you were doing. And do you mind sharing about kind of that and what were the drivers behind that, and how did that contribute to where you are now and shape you as a person then?
Absolutely. I mean, at the time, I had been asking, whilst kind of leading on a secondment basis, to go on to a leadership development program. And I know a lot of people will relate to this, that I was told at the time, no, you can't go on it because you're not a leader. It's only for leaders to go on it. And I'm like, really? So wouldn't it be so much better if, like, a day one as a leader, you would have all that development behind you rather than trying to figure it all out as you go? But I just think it was very suddenly that there was that I talk a lot about responsibility and accountability. And I think when the secondment was there, whilst you are very much learning the role and doing the role, the ultimate accountability probably isn't sat with you. Because, like I said earlier on, for want of that better phrase, you babysit it. Yeah. Whereas when I went into that full time, very suddenly, I felt the pressure. And that pressure was around, I think, a couple of things, really. One, how do I justify my position leading a team that yesterday I was part of? And I think probably the biggest part of that was how do I actually start to prioritize the things that are coming in? And a big thing that's talked about L&D quite a lot is how we auditate. We get lots of requests and we get told what to do, and the list just gets bigger and bigger. Yeah. And for those first sort of 2 or 3 months, I was very much going, how do I decide that then? How do I decide which one of these we do first? And I've got consultants coming to me, I've got stakeholders coming to me, I've got all this. I don't know, but I should. And then I got, eventually, because I now was a manager, I got booked on to the management development program. And even just from session 1, I remember it clearly in the new year, it just suddenly gave me that focus, and almost I took on the permission to go, this isn't about me. And that was in all directions, whether that's someone in my team I was speaking to, it'd be like, what do you think about that? If it was a stakeholder, it was a consultant, well, which one do you think we should work on first? And then the next part of that was that there was a coaching program as part of that leadership development program. And that just revolutionized everything. From the point that we had, obviously, as all these coaching trainings do, you have sessions around it in terms of a training room and some practice, but then you do some coaching, you get observations, you get feedback and development, and then do it again and do it an assignment. From the point in the first one I did, I thought, yeah, that was awesome. And I got the feedback that was terrible. That wasn't coaching. That was just a performance hit of one-to-one stuff. I'm like, oh, okay then, learning curve, here we go. But that sort of 6 months after that's what completely changed that. It was that moment of the pressure driven from I have to have all the answers.
Yeah.
To actually, the answers can't be mine.
No.
And my value can be seen in terms of how I help others rather than having to know it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good reflection, Rob, as well. And that kind of, for me, resonates with me as well. And very much I feel that a leader's role is not to know everything and to have the answers anyway, right? It's to empower and enable other people to be able to deliver that vision that you're setting as a leader. And that's for me is crystal clear what leadership's all about. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of get that sense of that epiphany moment for you, and kind of when you kind of were introduced, I guess, to the concept of coaching. Obviously, you'll have heard of coaching and being familiar with it, but actually, when you become embedded in it as a kind of as a mindset shift, I guess that's what it is, isn't it? I think when you actually really, when the penny drops, you realise that there's something going on here, and it's kind of it's more than just a kind of leadership development tool. Is this right?
100%. I think I made the mistake that a lot of people do, and I think that's crucial. That in L&D circles and coaching circles, we talk about leaders as if they're over there.
Yeah.
We're leaders too. Where's our development team? Where are our coaches? We suffer from the same traps that we fall into. We suffer from the same mistakes that we make, and hands up, I've done them all pretty much.
Yeah.
But
that's how you learn as well, right?
100%. But what I thought coaching was, it wasn't.
No.
And I'll put my hand up and go, when I first started working in an environment where there were coaches, I found myself falling into those traps. A lot of leaders do, kind of going, well, the fluffy stuff. How's that going to help? And what you just
time for this, all that kind of stuff.
Just get it done. Why aren't they just doing it? And it's clear, why do they need to talk about how they feel about that and all
sausage
that sort of
factory
stuff.
Type stuff.
Exactly that. But
what did you think coaching was then before you became, I guess, it sounds really corny, doesn't it? I guess before you kind of became more enlightened, then what did you think? Is that what you thought? Did you think coaching was just this kind of soft and fluffy, time wasting type thing that looks good on paper, but really, what's the point?
Well, I thought kind of two parts to it. I thought that there was the soft and fluffy nature of it, and that's what some coaches came across to me like at the time. But then I also thought, and this has been a product of a kind of call center environments, is that the coaching session was normally the rollicking that people had. So we're going to go over there and we're going to have a coaching session. That's never a good thing to hear in those, or it certainly was never a good thing to hear in those circles. And I think it just became, my view of it was that it was those one-to-ones that was part of that performance cycle, that performance management cycle of what have you done, what are you going to do, go and do it. How about yourself? How have you got into coaching? Because I know that obviously you're.
I don't even know I don't even know we ended up talking about coaching. That's the wonder again of where this goes.
I think it's inevitable, really, that we were going to start talking about.
I didn't intend to talk about coaching just for the benefit of our listeners as well. It's just a passion. It's a subject that I think that is kind of flows across what we do as well. When you're working with people, I think inevitably you are going to get onto the subject of how you can help people grow and how you can help people get better at what they do, right? And fundamentally that comes back to coaching, doesn't it, as well? So I'm finding it more and more difficult to have conversations without mentioning it nowadays.
Well, I think that's the thing, we see the power of it. And I think that, for those who are at that start of that journey with it, sometimes it's about not calling it that, because we've got all these lovely labels for everything, and that's one of the things about being in L&D and coaching. There's so many models, theories, phrases, all that sort of stuff.
Don't get me started on the subject of labels, by the way, because I'm not sure we'll have enough time in this podcast to cover that as well as everything else.
It's true, though. I always like compare it though to kind of go, when if you think you were training for a medical degree to be a surgeon, all the theories and models and practice and all those things you'd have to learn and go through. But when you're performing the surgery, you don't need to tell the person on the table all the things and explain the theories and use those words. They just want to know, am I going to be able to walk tomorrow, or will I feel better tomorrow? And that would be the advice that I give to leaders, to kind of go, at the end of the day, when we say we work with people, we're always around people.
Yeah.
And whether it's as a parent, I've got a couple of kids, whether that's as a husband, whether that's as a friend, whatever it is, all those relationships, there are times when you are coaching. We don't call it that. We don't need to call it that.
Yeah.
Bring it down to its base and go, you're genuinely interested in someone and you're asking them stuff to find out more so you can find a way how you can help them with something maybe.
Yeah, I think
there you go. You're coaching.
Yeah, and I think from speaking to yourself and from others who work with people, I think that's the common denominator. It's what I've found is, this is not a blanket rule for everybody, but the people that tend to kind of pursue more of a career in coaching have always had that passion for helping people, right? And wanting to help people. And you asked me that question earlier, which I'll come to in a very long roundabout way, about kind of coaching and how did I get into coaching. I think for me that was always kind of core of who I am, was about helping other people get better at what they're doing. My career, the golden thread, I guess, throughout my career has been about helping others, and I've always got that buzz. Be brilliant. Like got that buzz.
I see what you did there.
Out of helping other people get better at what they do, right? That's always something. That's whether that's been as a manager or as a team leader or just kind of in general, just kind of helping people, mentoring people. Before I even knew what this whole coaching thing were all about, right? That's followed me throughout my career, whatever job I've been in, and I've had quite a diverse career, Rob. I mean, I've worked across government. I've worked in lots of different roles. I've worked in policy development and delivery. I've worked in operational delivery. I've managed private offices. I've worked in HR. I've worked in learning and development for longer than I care to remember. And yeah, lots of different roles and all whatnot. But the core of it has always been around people, right? It's always been about people and helping people, whatever role they are in the hierarchy, about helping people get better at what they do. And yeah, I think for me that's where my kind of epiphanies happened. Is that, well, what ties all of these things together, and what do I need to do to kind of really understand this, and actually then really kind of be able to make me a better at doing that, a better coach, for want of a better word. And that's kind of what drove me towards completing my coaching qualifications and everything like that, right? Yeah, you don't need them. There's no legal requirement or anything like that, or professional requirement to do that. And indeed, but for me, it kind of felt like, as you said, to come back to your point about understanding all the knowledge and the theory and everything like that. Yeah, I'd always been doing coaching in some capacity or another for the last 22 years, whatever role I've been doing, but maybe I didn't necessarily understand the theory, the context, the models. I think that's important knowledge to know and to understand. But like you said, when I'm having a coaching conversation with somebody, I don't start talking about models and theories and all the rest of it. Yeah. Because if you start doing that, you're missing the fundamental part of what being a coach is all about, and that's listening to what that person's actually telling you, and then being able to follow that conversation and help them uncover what it is they need to do to get to progress, right? And if you start kind of bombarding, well, actually, your first thought is, well, what's the next question, or what model could I use in this situation? You're missing the point, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I think that's that same trap again, that and it's not just L&D, it's everyone. We fall into that trap of, how do we provide our value? And if our value is perceived to be based on knowledge, and we need to show people that knowledge, that's where we fall into that trap of, oh, and by the way, here's this model, I think you'll really like it. And even if you don't, at least now.
And we've all done it, right?
100%.
Oh, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's wheel that one out. Let's stop talking. Here's my flip chart. Let's stop talking about that. Leadership development. Let's go to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Well, do you think that annoys me about that? I had a conversation about Maslow again the other day, is that for some reason, Maslow's hierarchy of needs has been adopted as an L&D model. It's like it's related just to people in psychology. It's nothing.
We'll claim anything, won't we?
Exactly. Why isn't it in official?
Charlatans.
Why is it not in the CEO training and the leadership training? It's like everything. But all these things. If I challenge you, there was the session I used to do with when I was at Sky. And it was called Why Words Matter. And anyone listening to this from Sky will start cringing and go, oh, no, he's gone on about why words matter again. But there was a Japanese form of poetry called haiku. Now I'm trying to remember it myself now. I think it was like 17 syllables, was it? Something like that. And I'm saying, try and describe anything in a haiku format, because you'll be able to do it. It'll be challenging, but you'll suddenly realize, why the hell have I been using all those words to describe it for this many years if I can do it in 17 syllables?
Yeah.
And Maslow's hierarchy of needs is quite a simple thing, really. You look after the person first before you do anything else.
Yeah.
What do they need?
Yeah.
What do we actually need? And, what I actually like is some of the comedic looks of that now, where they've got things like Wi-Fi coming out the bottom and phone signal.
quite right.
People are starting to actually understand that a little bit. It's not about L&D. It's about the person.
Yeah.
I guess, how did you bridge that gap then, Mike? Because I'm quite interested there that you said that you had that, as you called it, the golden thread.
Yeah.
And then that's what drove you to complete your kind of accreditations, which, you don't necessarily need, but you're doing.
Yeah.
What was the point that what helped you realize that golden thread was actually coaching?
It's a good question, Rob. What helped me realize why coaching was my path? Because I guess ultimately, I wanted to be able to put myself out there professionally as a coach, and to show others and potential clients of my value as a professional coach, and that I was prepared to invest in myself and put my money where my mouth is, and really kind of take my own development quite seriously as well. And that's not me saying to everyone that you've got to do this, otherwise no one's going to take you seriously. For me, I wanted to take myself seriously. So I felt the time was right to really invest in myself and develop myself professionally as a coach as well. And I feel that makes me much more credible as a coach, because I've got the knowledge. That's all well and good as well. But I kind of wanted to have the kind of the full package as well. So I wanted to be able to really test myself. And for me, actually, academia is not a good place. I don't like academia. I'm not a natural academic. So it was a real challenge and a real kind of conundrum whether I wanted to actually do that and push myself back into that space as well. But I did, because I kind of wanted to stretch. All the time we talk about as L&D professionals or as coaches, particularly as people development professionals, encouraging people to stretch, to challenge, to learn, to grow, right? But if you're not doing that yourself, I kind of think it's quite hypocritical, if I'm being honest with you. I'm not a hypocrite. I'm authentic. Authenticity is one of my core values. So again, it's about me being authentic as a leader and as a person, as a coach, as a people development professional, and actually developing myself so I can become a better, more rounded professional as well. And some of those stuff I might not use, some of it I will. You'll take what's useful and you'll discard the rest, as they say as well. But actually, there's been so much benefit of actually developing myself professionally as a coach and aligning to, we've had conversations about professional coaching memberships and things like that. And I helped you join the coaching professional membership that I'm part of as well. And for me, again, that's not a necessity, but I kind of felt like that as a professional, being taken seriously and taking it seriously myself, that was the right thing to do as well, because, we're not a regulated body as such, but actually I think you are more regulated when you are part of a professional body. As well, and you're accountable. I kind of feel like it's kind of like self-governance and accountability for me, as well as kind of taking myself and my own personal development seriously and being able to showcase that to others, that's actually what I do then as well. So when I'm talking with authenticity and credibility as well.
I agree. I think with that accountability piece, I always talk about it in combination with responsibility. Because I think when you sign up and you become accredited by these bodies, and you've suddenly got a set of standards, but also normally a code of ethics that you're signing up to, that you have to actively align with and say how you align to them, and pass over to your clients. Then suddenly you're answerable to those, not just to yourself. And there is that kind of value then, that I feel responsible to those ethics rather than accountable to them.
100%.
And that responsibility then leads to me being accountable to them. That if I were ever to veer offline there, it isn't just, for example, the mechanics of business. It isn't just me that would get a complaint. It's well, I'm actually going to flag to EMCC that you've done this and you've not followed their code of ethics, and you suddenly drop from that. And oh no, well, there's a certain responsibility. Yeah. That said, that is the professional arm of coaching. And can people have great conversations around coaching conversations without those things?
Absolutely.
Yes, they can. Is every single coach who's got a professional accreditation a great coach? No. Is every coach who's not got a qualification or an accreditation a bad coach? No.
Yeah.
I would actively say that, understand what it means to be an accredited coach.
Yeah.
So, for example, before I actually went down the route and got the full accreditation, I would have these conversations with companies around, well, this is what it actually means, because I felt like they were conditioned just to ask for them. Have you got this? What was it you're hoping to look for? I just want to know if you've got it. What does that mean? And if you've got if you've got feedback and testimonials about the difference that you make, if you've got logs of how much coaching you've done, what sort of approaches and issues and challenges were brought into those conversations, reflections about how those conversations have then gone, the challenges for yourself, the growth for yourself, the impact on the other person, all those things, those are the things that those accreditations are saying. I mean, ultimately, the letters on the end of it could be anything. That's what it's showing for you.
And it's not one size fits all, is it? Like you say, just becoming a accredited qualified coach doesn't make you a better coach. I fundamentally agree with it, and I know some great coaches that aren't and don't want to be either, and that's great, and they are fantastic coaches or people development professional as well. But I think there's a more systemic problem, isn't there, with all of this as well, especially when it comes down to like qualifications, and it broadens out a conversation around kind of true inclusivity and accessibility for people, no matter what the background, where they're from, what their qualifications are. And I think I look to having a recruitment background as well. I look at things like when jobs are being advertised, one of the stipulations is must have a degree, or must have this, or must have that. Well, that's not inclusive. That's you're fishing in a very small pool of talent there, and there could be all kinds of reasons why someone didn't choose to go down the university path. But still, it's systemic. It's embedded within our psyche and our society that without having these qualifications, you can't possibly be any good to work here or be any good at this job, which, as we know, is a load of nonsense. But from an L&D perspective, we talk a lot about the kind of the difference between education and learning and development, don't we? And how we're conditioned in education to be told what to do. And then you come into the workplace and all of a sudden it's like, we're not going to tell you what to do anymore. And it's like, what do I do? You're not going to tell me what to do. It's kind of like that is a systemic problem, isn't it? I think as well.
It is. I mean, I'm quite an analytical person. One thing I love to do for myself, but also I think with teams and individuals who I run coaching with, is to really define these things, really sort of bring these things back, because you're right. Use the example you said there around job descriptions asking for degrees. If you actually asked, why are you asking for that? What would the answers be? You know what I mean? What would those be? And then drilling down into that even more. Is it the HR team that's putting that on there, the recruitment team? Is it the hiring manager that demands that? Or is it someone else in the business? And when they say they are looking for somebody educated to degree level, what do they attribute that to? What does that mean to them that person brings? Because quite often that's the question that can't be answered, or if you ask enough people, you get different answers.
I've got a thought on that, Rob, and it's because, and again, this is my recruitment background and from working in HR and everything else, is that we like to recruit people that look, sound, talk, feel like us. And that's why we have problems with inclusivity and diversity as well, because when we go to recruitment, when you're sitting on a chair panel, it tends to be on the whole kind of a similar type of crowd who are doing the recruitment and a similar type of mindset So there's not diversity of thought or diversity of mindset, and that's systemic throughout the whole campaign as well. So therefore, you tend to recruit the person who you think is going to be most like you. But we know that doesn't work, and we know that by doing that, we don't get any diversity of thought within our organisations.
To what degree do you think that's conscious or unconscious, or somewhere on that scale? Where do you think that is?
I think that's a really big question, isn't it, as well? And I definitely think it's a mix of both, if I'm being honest with you. We have our set of values and our belief stuff, and when that comes down to we could get quite deep with this one, and how we brought up in our surroundings and all the rest of it. And that goes forward with us throughout life as well, doesn't it? And that ain't going to change just because you suddenly are a recruiting manager, start interviewing someone. You don't just suddenly abandon all your world views just because you're there hiring someone. They stay with you as well. So I think, again, it comes back to the coaching. It always comes back to the coaching, doesn't it? And being able to really kind of hold a mirror up to yourself and challenge yourself and ask, those deep questions about, who am I as a person, and kind of where are my blind spots, and what am I prepared to do about that? How am I prepared to challenge myself on that and address that? Like I did, just using myself as an example with the educational system. That was something I knew was a massive blind spot for me, and academia is a massive blind spot for me because of lots of different challenges and reasons. I just didn't work with education. Education didn't work for me. But it's developing, I guess what I'm saying in a very long roundabout way, is it's developing self-awareness and being prepared to do something about it. And if managers, leaders can develop that sense of self-awareness and be able to really kind of reflect on themselves as a people as well, then you can actually answer that question about is it conscious or unconscious bias that's preventing this, that's contributing to or preventing creating a more inclusive, diverse process. And you can do something about it. If you don't, you won't. It's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of both in there as well. And certainly in like some of the bigger companies, like you said, if they're institutionalized in the sense that the job descriptions always just say the same things, haven't really reinvented themselves over the decades. If you're saying, let's say you've got automatic sifting technology that comes through on CVs, and you're asking for degrees, and people who haven't got degrees don't even get through that automated process. How many great people and great conversations and great diverse contributions have you missed out on? Simply because of an automated, not even human process. And that's based on maybe a criteria or two that you don't even know, if quizzed, why you actually put that in there. I mean, the why probably, when I've asked at first kind of level to go,
you want to filter people out.
We want to filter people out, but then the individual questions to kind of go, well, degree level, that just shows there's a certain level of skill and education and all that. Okay. Specifically though, why are you asking for that in relation to the job that they're coming into? The skills. And are those skills academically learned skills, or could they be skills that are just more human? Getting people to really define it. One of my questions, the favorite things I tend to do in the workshops that I do and the coaching I do, is things like the words performance and trust and emotional intelligence and things like that. I'm going to go, what does it actually mean to you? And the amount of people, and by the way, again, I'm not pointing and criticizing, because very rarely have we done it in the past, but how many people actually sit down and think about it? Actually think about what that word means to them and why it's important and why are they asking for it. I think it might just be, well, we don't need it.
Don't you think, though, there's a big question there about that we don't create space or time to think as well? And I know when you get into the kind of coaching mindset, you become much more aware of the importance of reflection, right? It's part and parcel of coaching as well. But actually, that's just not coaching skill. That's a real life skill as well. And where you don't have the time, space, and energy to sit down and give yourself and pause and reflect and think about things, then you are just going to leap from one decision into another, and that doesn't mean that that's going to be a good decision making either, as well. And and that can come back to any number of scenarios and circumstances as well, be that whether you're investing in yourself, or be that's whether you're a recruitment manager who's looking to kind of get a campaign done and dusted as quickly as possible to get a bum on seat, because they're under pressure to do that, and they've got a huge gaping hole what they need filling. Right, so then sit down and start reflecting on things and start asking themselves, self-reflective questions about the biases, unconscious or otherwise. Just don't happen. It's kind of there's a chain of events, there's a timetable, and you've got to get that post filled, right? That really is an important point there about actually, if you stop, pause, reflect, you can make better decisions and hire better candidates, and you can really ask yourself, why are you asking the type of questions that you're asking in this, and do you really need to be asking this to get the right sort of person you want to come into your organization?
Yeah. I think people proactively, what they could do about this is run more experiments to do with it, because I think you're right. When people have got these big targets, and let's get it right, sometimes you do just need to do. We haven't got the time, and that's a legitimate reason we haven't got that time. The thing is, though, you'll never have time. You'll always find something to keep you busy with. So how do you actually go about saying, right, we need to change something? And if you need to change your entire recruitment process, people are naturally going to go, oh, not sure that. And we've got how many open job vacancies and how nutrition levels like this. And we've got this many competency frameworks and this many job descriptions. We've got to update them all and go, no, it's going to take too long. Why don't you just look at one or two of the vacancies that you've got and try it differently? Well, that's it for part 1, which was the Be Brilliant People podcast. Now it's time for part 2, which is the Leadership Untitled podcast. Enjoy. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the second part, or the second volume. Let's sound grander than part, we'll go volume, of the mashup that is the Be Brilliant People podcast and the Leadership Untitled podcast with myself, Rob Moores, and
me, Mike Bedford.
There we go. 2 presenters. What could go wrong?
Lots. And I'm sure it will. And
always does.
That adds to the flavour, doesn't it? And
it does indeed.
The spice of live broadcasting, I think.
Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you that are looking at this on YouTube or watching this on YouTube will notice that I've completely changed outfits. I think my background's slightly different. I've even got a bit of sunburn on my head from the Jubilee weekend. And mine looks almost exactly the same, because he has the foresight to have virtual backgrounds and T-shirts that are more or less the same colour.
More or less the same. If I kind of ducked down, you probably couldn't even tell. But I just said to Rob that today I've got Marvel, whereas before it was kind of like Star Wars. That's kind of me showing a little bit about myself there.
That's it. Still sponsored by Disney.
Pretty much.
Exactly that. So we got to the end last time when we started looking at, or started talking about, experiments.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
The power of experiments. And we were talking about recruitment in that little nutshell at the end of it. But, I think this is an important trend we need to look at, because I think in the normal world, and I say normal world, I'm talking about what we referred to as the normal world pre-COVID. It was a case of, even then, trying to get wholesale change and large scale change in organizations was a nightmare, and quite often resulted in it not happening. Whereas I think, people started talking about experimenting then, whereas now kind of the volatility behind culture and business and everything we now do is ramped up a lot with things like the Great Resignation, but not only that, just like the aftermath of everything COVID, the flexibility that people now want, the demands of what leaders need to do and provide for their teams, etc., etc., etc. So I think a good way of kind of beginning this second part is to carry on looking at that mindset that leaders now need to adopt if they weren't adopting it before, and what that power of kind of experimentation might look like in certain ways. What's you thinking, mate?
Yeah, well, firstly, I've started stimming now while I'm talking to you. For those who don't know what stimming is, that stimming is me playing with like some sort of like fidgety type toy in the background to help me kind of focus and keep me on track. Otherwise, my mind's just going to be drifting away in a million different directions. So sharing a little bit about myself.
There is a reason why fidget spinners and cubes and all that are so popular.
Like me.
My son got me this, and he's in Edinburgh. It's a load of magnets, and I sit here most times and just keep flicking the magnets top to bottom.
So Rob's stimming too. There you go.
I've got that. But when I'm on a mic and you'll hear big clicky magnets, I've got things like little rubber things and stuff like that. They're all there, mate.
The beauty is you usually see, but I thought I'd share that with you. I make some extraordinary type creatures and animals out of blue tack when I get stimming. Without really thinking too much
There's
about
another episode for you.
Oh, yeah. there's so many possibilities, right, within this podcast. Some of it broadcastable, some of it not. But yeah, I think you're right, Rob. I think the pandemic wasn't a great thing for a lot of reasons, but it did expedite change, right? It brought forward change that was long overdue and didn't happen and should have happened, could have happened, but didn't happen, but has happened. And we seem to be kind of stuck in this kind of zone, almost like a twilight zone now, don't we, between worlds, where there's an element of people that want to go back to how things were, and that's not saying now we always look back to how things were, usually with rose tinted glasses, don't we? Like, so
yeah,
you think back to how great it was in the 80s, when I was a kid and this and that, but actually when you actually look back, a lot of it probably, am I allowed to swear on podcast?
Well, you can do what you want on it. You just have to tell people.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to swear. We'll just have to explicitly rate it. Not too blue, by the way, but yeah, when we look back through rose-tinted glasses, a lot of it's actually quite shit, really, isn't it? It's not. It wasn't as great a time as we remember, and I think perhaps there's an element of that, and I welcome your thoughts on this, Rob, as well. But there's perhaps an element of that happening with kind of the shift that's happened because of the pandemic, the way that we work, the way that we interact with each other, and thinking of it in its terms of it from an L&D perspective. Even now, things have changed from an L&D perspective. That's all been brought forward and radically changed and shifted overnight. Organisations had to rapidly shift and change overnight. Now, how we work, how we interact with people and do things has all changed as well, and we seem to be stuck at the moment. It's been almost just labelled as hybrid, but actually I'm not really sure whether anyone understands what that actually means and whether we've actually come to any kind of concrete evidence-based decision about, well, what happens next. I think we're still kind of stumbling our way through. And depending on, I guess, on the type of leader that you have running your organisation, that affects that culture within that organisation too. So I'm interested to probably have a discussion here, Rob, about kind of, well, with that said, and with all the kind of change that's happened as a result of the pandemic, what type of leaders do we need right now then, in terms of the changes that have happened and the way that the world has evolved and will continue to evolve? Surely we've moved beyond a kind of an autocratic type leadership culture now, where people are kind of not trusted to do what they need to do and not trusted to behave like adults and to be able to do the best work from wherever that is. And that's not me just kind of advocating or saying that working remotely is the solution to everything and that's what we should all do, because I'm not. I think though there's a missing debate about, well, surely then we just look for supporting people to do their best work wherever that is as well. But I guess what type of kind of mindset do leaders need to have to be able to adapt to this new reality that we're now in as well, and to kind of take us out of this kind of chasm of the still what feels like the great unknown. And for me, the great unknown triggers that uncertainty, anxiety for people, and makes people think, well, you know what, if I can't get any clarity, and I need that clarity to help me in my life and my circumstances, if I can't get that clarity, then I'm going to have to look elsewhere, because this really isn't kind of going to support me or suit me in my life and my circumstances as well. And you can take that across a real broad range of things, can't you? Can look at kind of the accessibility for people in terms of work and accessing work, from a disabled perspective, or you could look at it from a kind of a mum who's returning to the workforce, and there's all different kinds of ways of looking at the situation as well. But what type of mindset should leaders be looking to adopt now in this time that we're living in, and how can they go about that if kind of leaders are already stuck in a fixed mindset? So they think, I want everybody back into an office because presenteeism is the way forward. I want to know where you are at all times so I can keep an eye on you and see what you're doing because I don't trust you otherwise. And you see this peddled all the time in the press and the media by so-called, celebrity business people and entrepreneurs and all the rest of it, don't you?
Yeah.
And peddled across the kind of the media. Then where do we go from here? Because that's clearly not the kind of position that we're in, and people have woken up and realised that we don't live in that world anymore, and now we have choice. So,
and that's the key thing, choice. I think the strange thing about all this sort of stuff is that the same people that would talk about you can do your work from anywhere would also then accuse someone like Boris Johnson, if he was at Chequers, from not taking his job seriously. He should be in number 10. We all have views around this sort of stuff, and when we look at opposites, we quite often think, the opposite that suits us best in that moment is the right answer, and therefore everything's polarized and everyone who believes the opposite is wrong. And quite often the answer is in the middle of all this sort of stuff. So, it is, and I've made the same statements, it is a sweeping statement to kind of go that those managers who want people all to be in the workplace, that means that they don't trust their people to do it from home. And absolutely, there will be some leaders that are taking that mindset because they don't trust their people to do it from home. Equally, there will be some leaders who think the best environment for that particular type of work is for everyone to be together. For example, I've seen, I think this week, quite topically, Elon Musk about Tesla and telling everyone he wants them back into the workplace. Now we're coming out the other end of the pandemic. And actually his mindset, from what I can gather, is built upon the fact that that's how he's built his reputation, that he was always present. He always made sure that he was visible physically to the people in his team. And that made a massive contribution to the success of the company. So I kind of think, there was something as a headline that was written after the first couple of days of the test match last week when England played the first test match against New Zealand. And it said, whilst everything changes, nothing changes. And they've been through a period of massive change where the captain's changed, the backroom staff have changed, the team sheet has changed, everything's changed. But we had the same old batting collapse, and it turned out that Joe Root was the hero, pretty much like it was when he was the captain and we're losing everything. And I think, there's some great lessons from all this sort of stuff, that whilst we've had great change, in the same time, in the same moment, nothing changes. And what I mean by that is that leaders, for me, their mindset has to be going into this around speaking and co-creating with their people about what this looks like. You can't just tell everyone to work from home. You can't just tell everybody they need to be in the office. It also depends on the company. So, for example, there's got to be some sort of respect for the fact that, obviously, let's go to an extreme, that if you work in A&E in a hospital, you can't do that from home. You've got to be in that workplace. Now, that's a black and white example. Us as coaches, for example, there's a great argument that the best work is done virtually, because quite often the conversations that you have are only 1 hour long. You can speak to anyone in the world now without the consequences of costs of travel, carbon footprints, all those sort of great things. So this is a great example of that. Now, we would be as wrong to say everyone should work from home as people in A&E would be saying everyone should work from the office, because that's where they should be. It's specific to those organizations. One thing I know I have heard so many people say over the last year is, one thing that's true, they have enjoyed working from home. They have enjoyed reconnecting with their families. They've enjoyed the flexibility. What I've also heard that was true is that a lot of people did have an element of boredom with that eventually. They wanted to get out and about and speak to people, and that they missed that office environment where they would see those people and chat to them quite a lot. There's a certain chemistry they're missing out on. So I think, that leadership challenge for me is to get into the bottom of that, not to dictate, but to build it with them. What does this company need? What's the outputs of it? How do we best generate that output? How does your contribution to that output look and feel and sound like? And what is that going to be for all of us in terms of how we work, where we work, how we collaborate, all those great things? Because I guess ultimately, and I think a CEO once taught me this in somewhere I've worked in the past, we have to be careful that flexibility doesn't become inflexibility, in the sense that if everybody wants to work at home on a Friday, and I know that now we're going down the route in the UK of trialing 4-day weeks, which I think is a fantastic initiative. But if we work with companies who absolutely cannot, let's say some of our main partners or suppliers cannot go down the route for whatever reason that is, use the NHS as an example again, of a 4-day week, it becomes decidedly inflexible that we're not reachable on a Friday. So all those relationships and dynamics need to be taken into account. It's not just a management decision. It's on management to collaborate with their people and co-create what that looks like, what success looks like. And then people, unfortunately, will vote with their feet. If people don't want to work in an office environment or go to work and they have a job in an organization where that's needed, they will go and find one that fits their circumstances better. There's a bit of a soapbox for you then, Mike. So I don't know, pull that apart. What do you think of that?
I can only give my own perspective. And for me, it feels like this is from personal experience. I feel like where there's a purpose for doing something face-to-face, that I'm absolutely down with that. I think and I enjoy that. It makes a lot of sense. I get a lot of value out of that. But what we didn't do well before the pandemic was doing things with purpose. We just did things. So you go to, for example, the physical place of work just to kind of sit there without a clear purpose or agenda, just to basically do your kind of churn type stuff that you could do from anywhere in the world.
Agreed.
And perhaps not even speak to someone for the whole day. Get your head down, bash on the keys and fling loads of emails out and clear lots of stuff and put your bag on and go on.
Yeah.
And have all the commuting and travelling on top of that and being away from your family and, affecting perhaps your well-being and everything else.
Yeah.
For what? I don't know. But where there's a clear purpose for doing something. So from my own example, if I'm going to kind of deliver a face-to-face session with a group, I'm facilitating a team session with a group around kind of their culture and identity, actually got a lot more value and benefit out of doing that face-to-face with those people. Picked up on those nuances and things that perhaps wouldn't be able to be picked up on so easy over a virtual type session. So that was something with kind of purpose and identity. So for me, it very much feels like when you're asking someone to do something, you should have a clear purpose and intent behind it. It shouldn't just be just because I said so.
Yeah,
mentality.
Completely agree with you. And I think, the Michael Bungay-Stanier point from the Coaching Habit book that he wrote, that I can't remember which of the 7 questions it was. I think it's towards the end, though, 5 or 6, when he says, if you're saying yes to this, what else are you saying no to?
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, that point you made there, and I guess, I also want to come back to the purpose point of it, is that, quite often in those office environments, we were sitting there at our desk, chomping away on emails, blah, 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 Skype meetings, etc. 100%, all that stuff could be done from home. Why on earth are we doing it there? However, I kind of, if I look at my experiences in kind of multi-floor contact center environments where what you've just described is exactly the case, what was also the case is most people were told not to do that, not to sit in their chair and just do their own stuff. They were told to get up, go and mingle, go and sit with the teams that they supported, go and understand what the complaints department went through every day by sitting with them, listening to the calls, go and talk face-to-face to their stakeholders, build rapport, build relationships, all those things. And they didn't do them for whatever reason it might be, because they kind of sat there with this physical or non-physical barrier, I should rather say, of being on a different floor. Whereas now, in that environment, if everyone works, and this is kind of a devil's advocate kind of argument, but if everyone works from home, then we're 100% not getting that. So, I think for me, when you talk about that purpose and that alignment through to that vision, there is the question, the things we are doing, can they just be done from anywhere? And how do we facilitate that? Yeah. Absolutely. But also before that step, the things that we're actually doing in the office, was that productive? Are those the things we should have been doing? Or was there actually something else that we were missing out on there? Because I think that is the one thing, the one downside I hear from so many people of working by themselves at home, is that not meeting people. And if you're not kind of mingling and socializing with the people that you would ordinarily socialize with in an office environment, there's no chance you're socializing with those people that you should have been socializing with in an office environment.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate with that.
Go for it.
So for me, some people need that social interaction. A lot of people don't.
Yeah.
As well, and a lot of people thrive. So-called introverts thrive when they're able to kind of cut themselves off from the noise, so to speak, which I count myself very much in that crowd. I'm happy to be amongst people and to do, as you know, Rob, from knowing me, I'm happy to be kind of to do that, but I also get some of my deepest thinking and best work done when I'm able to be by myself without being tapped on the shoulder every minute, without having to engage with people, without having to do this and do that. Because for me, then that detracts from me being able to get into my own hyper focus as well. So I think we have to think about it in the round as well, about, well, what do people need as well? Because I don't think it's as simple as just throwing everyone together and expecting collaboration. And kind of what I hear all the time is, well, human beings work better when they're together, they collaborate better together, ideas come up, not everybody.
I completely agree with you.
I think there's a bigger, broader piece, I think, thinking about, well, how do people's brains work and how do people function and how are people able to do their best work as well, and not, again, just tarnish everybody, whether that's working from home or whether that's working in an office or working from wherever, saying that, well, that's the best way to do it. Because it just isn't, and I think we still feel quite far off resolving that one, because it's quite a difficult one to resolve, and I kind of feel like
you've hit the nail there. Hit the nail there, though. That is that thing. Not only is this an individual thing for leaders, it's an individual thing for the contributors and the performers. It's individual, and the individual performer who works at their best in an environment where they're not disturbed, and perhaps get their most productive in an environment where they're on their own with none of those disruptions in an office environment, that has to be taken into account 100%. Equally, if a senior leader or the CEO or the owner of an organization, not just dictating for the sake of dictating, I want everyone in because that's what I think should be it. If it's linked to purpose again, if there's linked to a reason, the NHS we've mentioned before, you're not going to sell ice creams on the van unless you take it around the roads, all those sort of things. That's an individual thing. And I think what then we are is we're actually facilitating choice. 2 years ago, yes, there was choice, but nowhere near as much. People who worked at some of the call centers that I might talk about in the past, they couldn't do their job from homes. If you chose a call center job, you had to go to the call center. Whereas now you can choose a call center job and do it from home. So we have to expect that if a certain person leading a certain industry with a certain call center wants to drive their business in a way where people collaborate together and they see that collaboration as part of their vision, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Lead your business in that way, and you will either win or lose or somewhere in the middle based on those choices, as long as you're not just doing it because of dictatorial reasons of you want people to do what you want them to do. And people will find their own way. I think, this part of the Great Resignation is seen as a bad thing in some ways, but it's also a good thing in some ways, that those people will go, well, this isn't for me. I don't want to come back to an office environment. I've learned, this is really important for me. I'm going to find something that fits what I now believe about myself and what I've learned about myself. That's cool. And on the other hand, someone else has learned that they don't like that time on their own and they want to be part of an office environment. So you'll end up effectively swapping jobs.
I think one thing that really worries me, that concerns me about that as well, though, Rob, is the fact that people who for example, are neurodivergent, so they could be autistic or ADHD or dyslexic or whatever, that if a leader says, which is fine, it's every leader's remit to say what they want for their organization, says, no, I want you all back in an office no matter what, that's how I think things are going to be, then you're excluding by proxy quite a large part of society and talent, and all those brains and all that talent that could come and work for you as an organization. You're kind of closing the door to that by removing that option. So if my organization said to me, you need to be back in office 5 days a week, I couldn't work in that organization anymore, and I'd have to find another job. But essentially I'd be forced out the door just because of who I am and how I think and how I work best. And that might not necessarily, I know you say that creates opportunity, but that might not be a good thing for me either, because change can be not just unsettling, it can be really detrimental to someone's mental health 100%. As well when they're in that position as well. So I think it has to be very carefully managed, this next step. And I'm just not convinced that we're looking at the broader well-being perspective of how leadership decisions impact people, not just in terms of where they are or where they're based and that whole argument, but more broader and deeper than that, how that impacts actually on their ability to be able to function and do their work as well.
And this brings us full circle back to the start where we talked about experiments. You know, if you're going to go, I want everyone back in the organization now from next week. Well, that's not how you should execute this change, because you know, while somebody may have been happy 5 days in the week 2.5, 3 years ago, now they're not, for a number of reasons. They might not have been that happy then, but they thought they had to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's proved that it's not. So again, it's that sort of trial and error thing that, you know, who does it work for? Who doesn't it work for? What does that mean for the business? Which teams can, which teams can't? Because that's something within an organization. There are so many workers within the NHS who have kept referencing that could do their jobs from anywhere, that only have to be in 1 or 2 days a week. Whereas there's those teams in there that it's just practically impossible for them not to be there. And so people would be excluded from that in a certain way if that was a barrier for them. So it's really getting for every single organization. And, you know, and I guess where we are at the moment, the problem we have at the moment is if you set up a brand new business right now, you can build that exactly how you want. The structure of it, the mindset of it, the benefits associated with it, the flexibility of it, everything you can build to exactly how you want it right now. What we've got is a structure that is old in a world of a new mindset. And that's the issue we've got at the moment. You have got companies who are paying potentially millions a year for properties that will cease to be a viable investment if they're not full with people. But equally, it might be that if you just shut down that office because we think people want to work from home all the time, that then alienates half of the organization because they actually want to come to that office, but it's not viable to have that office for half of the number of people. So the experimentation piece, I think, is absolutely key for that, because I think, you know, whichever way you go down this route at the moment, people will be excluded or alienated from it. And the only way around that is to dip our toes and have conversations. If you just make sweeping decisions, we want everyone to work from home or everyone to work from an office, there's going to be casualties.
I guess that's where I'm coming from. The debate doesn't feel very inclusive from where I'm sitting.
No.
And the decisions, as you've said, are being made by leaders exacerbated by press about changing people's complete work and way of life overnight to where they've been and where they are now. Don't forget, you know, many people let work into their lives and mingled and blended and fused the two together for the best part of 2 years. So they then suddenly said, well, with none of that stuff matters anymore. We kind of want you just to do as you're told now. Don't really feel fair or equitable to me as a person. Looking at it from a kind of a perspective of, it's a two-way relationship, right? Working as an employee doesn't mean that you just do as you're told.
Mm-hmm.
It's a two-way relationship, and it has to be give and take from both parties as well. So if I were a leader and I were coming to you, Rob, now, and I were asking you, look, Rob, what should I do in these circumstances? I need to get people back into an office, but I'm aware of all these different challenges. What would your advice be? What should I do?
Well, I think, I'd first of all, I'd steer clear of advice straight up. It would be, well, what are the reasons? What's the why? Why do you need people back in the office? It's delving into those reasons. What are your values? What are your beliefs around this sort of stuff? Because that leader I'm coaching could be the CEO. Okay, why do you want people in the business? Is that something that's a core belief of yours around how the business performs best, how it serves its customers best, whatever it might be? Is that a pressure that's being put on you from board level that you don't believe in and you don't agree with? Have you spoken to people about that and what the reaction to that might be? Have you done some sort of pile into conversations, focus groups, all that sort of stuff? If it's a first line, middle management leader, let's say, for example, quite similar in the sense, why are you wanting your people back in the building? Is this, again, your decision about how you lead your team and your vision for your team, how you believe they align to the vision and mission of the organization? Or is it something your managers told you to do? Get them all back in. How do you feel about that? And really, as you won't be surprised with this answer of mine, as both being that kind of coaching angle, is what are the answers that come from within them? From an advice point of view, it goes back to what I said before. It is about having those conversations, because I genuinely believe that this answer is individual at every single level.
Yeah.
And somebody will be excluding no matter what the decision is, unfortunately. That's kind of like part of life to a certain degree. What I could tell you is that if I was opening up a business right now again, we're going to go into the realms of fantasy for a second, because we don't know what that business would be. We don't know how big that business would be, and we don't know what the demands of that business would be. But I would ideally have a working environment where people would be free to be able to do their job where they do it best.
Yeah.
But that is a sweeping gesture from me to kind of go, okay, practically, would that always be possible depending on what the hell I ended up growing as a business? I don't know. I couldn't
have answered it better myself, Rob, because that's exactly what I would have said. It is about having the honest, open conversations with people about this is where we're at. This is where we're moving as a business, whether that's good or bad for you. This is where we're heading as a business. Then there's a choice to make, isn't it, as well? Or how can we support you to do your best work based on whatever movement that business is going in? That might be right or wrong for you as a person, and then you've got a decision to make, haven't you? But I think you're right. I think from a leadership perspective, you need to be completely open, transparent, and honest with your people, and having those genuine, authentic conversations. For me, the conversation just don't feel authentic right now, and I think it needs to be. It needs to be much more authentic, so people can actually make the right decisions now based on. And those decisions might not be to be part of that brand and that organization right now, but we've literally come back full circle, haven't we? To it's a coaching conversation that needs to be had with your people to work out, so they can work out what the best solution is going to be, no matter what that is. That could be right or could be wrong for the organization.
It's a tough one, because what's also true, I find, is that when every voice is heard, that doesn't always necessarily mean you get to the best answer. And as daft as that might sound, because there's some famous things I can kind of think of, but I think there was an episode of Auf Wiedersehen Pet, and that's half the audience have just switched off and gone, what the hell's Auf Wiedersehen Pet?
I know it. That's me showing my age now as well.
But they democratically did a vote on what colour I think it was they were going to paint the cabin.
Yeah.
And you could have a first choice and a second choice. And they were that kind of like... that opposed in terms of their kind of views about their primary choices. I think they ended up agreeing through the vote that it would be yellow. However, what they also then noted is that no one had actually voted yellow as the first choice, but everyone had put it as the second choice to stop the other people getting their first choice. So you kind of see sometimes you have to be careful with this stuff. How many times in corporate environments again have we said, right, let's put a vote out for what people want to do for Christmas, the Christmas do this year? And then what happens is 49% of the people are unhappy with what we're doing for the Christmas do this year because that's not what they chose. So is it the right thing to have 2 Christmas do's, 3 Christmas do's, 3 separate things where no one's together? Or was the purpose of this to come together as a team to celebrate the success we've had over the year and to reward those people? So you see, there's a fine balancing act with all these things. Now, I don't really sit on one side of it or another because I genuinely think it's completely individual. For some companies, let's use the Christmas thing as an example. For some companies, it might be the right thing just to give everyone a Christmas present or a bonus and they spend it in their own way. For another company, it might be the right thing to take 50 people out for a party, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But you can see how the conversations, if they go too far, and I think sometimes this is where I talk about these experiments rather than just wholesale, right, let's go from dictating everything to suddenly making everything democratic. Again, that in itself is fraught with the difficulties of change. How do we try these things out? If we were to put a vote out, what sort of things might happen? Let's do it with a group of people. Let's see what that would do. Going back to the Auf Wiedersehen Pet example, why on earth would you paint the cabin in a colour that no one wants? But democratically opening it up meant we got that. I mean, as of yesterday, we are recording this on the 8th of June. As of yesterday, Boris Johnson got through by the skin of his teeth on that no confidence vote. Democratically, we have a leader that nearly half of his own party don't want in position, let alone the country. I mean, it's difficult sometimes, isn't it? Democracy and choice sometimes is a better thing as none.
Yeah, but the conversation, I think, is the important part, isn't it? Out of all of it, the conversation needs to happen. Otherwise, you're just going to create, as you know from coaching, and not to turn anybody off or send anyone to sleep, but when you don't feel you're aligned to your values and your purpose, then that creates dissonance, doesn't it? And when you have dissonance, you become disconnected. So there's an important point there about making sure that people feel aligned, isn't there, to the values and purpose of what it is that you're doing. And if they're not aligned anymore, then perhaps it's not the right path for them to follow.
And it's understanding that, what's the clarity of that.
That's a tough call for you as an individual as well, isn't it? To decide.
You can't make that decision, though, can you? You can't make that decision unless you are really clear on what that senior leader, that CEO, and this is where, for there to be standards in an organization, there has to be a standard bearer, a role model of those standards. And how on earth are you, as an individual contributor or a leader, how are you supposed to make a decision if your values are aligned with those of the organization? If those values aren't either clear or they're not acted out, they haven't been promoted or role modeled by the people at the top.
And that's what we're seeing, isn't it? And that's what we're seeing in organizations. We're seeing the diktats coming down from the top, and then those leaders who have been cajoled to enforce the party line, for want of a better word, they're feeling they're not aligned with their values, and that's coming across to their team and their managers, and then that echoes throughout the organization, right? And that creates dissonance throughout the whole culture. Then as well. Whereas if the most senior leader in the organization, you quoted Elon Musk with his setting out his values and purpose. To be fair, at least he set them out. And then whether you think that's right or wrong, you can then decide, well, that completely fundamentally opposed to my values and my purpose and my sense of where I want to go as a person, and therefore, I no longer feel like I can be part of this as well.
It's much better that way, to kind of go, you know what, I feel managed out of this process because everyone wants me to work there and I don't want to. Yeah. That's horrible. But if I'm going, I get why that person wants to work in that way.
Yeah.
I understand why they need that from someone in my role.
Yeah.
And I also understand that whilst it's been possible to do my role for the last 2 years in this way, I still understand and believe in that manager. I trust that person as to why it's still preferable for it to be done there in that way.
Yeah.
This was a necessity rather than a case study of it working. Okay, I get that. Yeah. However, it's not for me.
Yeah.
It's almost, the thing is the scale of this stuff. 3 years ago, you might have bought a little 2-seater sports car, but over lockdown, what you've done is you've decided to go on more family holidays. You've had another child and all those sort of things. You know what? The vision of this little 2-seater sports car is no longer aligned with your own needs.
So you weren't going to use personal examples on this podcast?
I wish, mate. Yeah. But now you're suddenly going, right, well, no, I need that. I'm going to leave that and I'm going to go to this.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a car is much more materialistic. It's much more a functional piece. A job and a role and a purpose to do with that job and a role is much more emotionally connected to our beliefs and what we need to do. And also the rewards of work, so being paid to do that, is intrinsically connected to our ways of life. And, especially in the current climate where we've got the cost of living, petrol prices, food prices, all those things, it's not very easy for people to go, oh, I don't agree with that. I'm off and I'm going to another job. Completely get it.
Yeah.
But that, for me, that doesn't change the answer.
Mm.
And there's probably a generational thing in this as well. That God rest the soul of my grandparents, that if I was to speak to them, they would probably be saying to me now, just do the job.
Yeah.
Just do the job. Your priorities are getting the money to feed your family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who cares where you want to work from home or not?
Yeah.
That's what they'd probably say.
Yeah.
Whereas there are certainly, you go to the opposite end of that spectrum. There are people that are entering the workplace over the last couple of years that have never known anything other potentially than working from home.
Yeah. Well, my children have seen me doing it for the last 5 years. So they now assume that's what work is. That's how work gets done.
Yeah.
So they'll say, oh, I'll have an office at home when I'm older and all that. So I'll be like, well, what sort of job do you want to do? I want to be a vet. Okay, so will you be a vet at home then with your office? So it's
attitudes. It is attitudes and beliefs. My 11-year-old son, because my wife, she physically goes to an office somewhere 2 days a week because she loves to. And then she works at home for 2 or 3 days a week, depending on the workload, because she also loves being able to do that. Yeah. Now, because I spend most of my time working from home, because I can have coaching conversations and training sessions and workshops over here, my 11-year-old son thinks I don't have a proper job. Well, you can't, because you don't go to work.
Go to work being the thing. It's the thing of what is work, isn't it? That fundamental question of what work is.
So if I was to kind of close down my business tomorrow, which I'm not doing, but if I was to close down my business tomorrow and say, right, I want to go back into corporate life and be employed, it would be easy for me in the sense that I would be going, I know what I need from a role now. I know what I need to be able to do. I know what I need that to facilitate. Yeah. It's much more difficult when you're in that role already and you need to get out of it.
Yeah.
But in the same way, there's an old adage that it's always easier to find a job when you're in one than when you're out of one.
Oh yeah, definitely. For throwing quotes out there, and there's one I really like from leader I really respect called Ruth Gawthorpe. She's a smart working revolution, and she says, "Work happens in brains, not offices."
Mm-hmm.
I really like that as well, and the whole ethos around actually. Forget working in an office, forget working hybrid, forget working from home. It's about smarter working.
Yeah.
think there's a huge shout out to that now, and a huge conversation, isn't it, about kind of the whole concept of, I mean, gosh, we haven't got time to cover this in this podcast, Rob, but what is work?
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. Straight away. You know, those works in brains completely get you. So how is it you get the best out of those individual and collective brains? You know, because a lot of your stuff, and you know, you've told your story quite a lot, both on this podcast and on the post that you put on LinkedIn, that, you know, you do your best work, or your best time sometimes is spent on your own. Equally, I see you do a lot of collaboration stuff. You've got the podcast, and you love going to see people. In fact, I met you myself at the Coaching Culture Conference last year. How do you start saying, okay, how do we best get that working through the people, through individuals, through collaboration? When's the best time for it to be on their own and not be on their own? When's the best time to collaborate and not collaborate? Yeah. There you go. We've solved everything and nothing.
We've covered absolutely. It's like two blokes in a pub type conversation.
I should have had a pint. We should have had a pint. I now want to change my podcast to the podcast with a pint. There you go.
I think that's a work in motion that I'm happy to be part of.
Do it. I guess, you know, for the second part of this mashup, my friend, as you know, that my little thing is to always come up with a title for the podcast based on what we spoke about. Now, we've spoke about everything. Yeah. But what do you think a nice title for our little mashup might be?
What is work?
What is work? What is it? What? Just what?
The what is work? The what is work would.
Yeah.
You know,
what is anything?
Yeah.
I quite like that. Just like literally just a what.
What if? What if? Yeah.
What if? What everything?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that, mate. Yeah. Brilliant stuff. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking to you over these last couple of little mashup episodes we've done. It's taken us a bit of a while because we've had a few challenges in the middle of it all, but we're there.
Like actors, that we kind of start the script, we go away, we come back, pick it back up.
That's exactly it, my friend.
We get back into costume and back into character.
Well, I didn't bother, but there you go.
More than others.
that hurt. Right, mate, any last words for yourself?
I even had a shave for the occasion.
I've not had a shave for any occasion since my wedding.
No, it's been an awesome experience, Rob. I really enjoyed it. It's kind of taken us to places I didn't expect, but it's been a really good, interesting, thoughtful conversation as well. Absolutely. I've enjoyed fusing our two minds together to have that conversation as well, which I always say it's always a challenging one when you get two coaches having a conversation.
Yeah. But, you know, I think in the same way, I don't think we've spoken as coaches for quite a lot of it. And I think, you know, the lesson there for me is that we quite often seek advice or seek other people out of the conversations who might think the same way as us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always say this, you know, when you work as coaches and when you work as leaders, there is this appetite to always get to a result by the end of the conversation. Okay, so now we've had that. What's the answer then?
Yeah.
And it's not always possible.
No.
But in the same way, there should always be an action at the back of that. There should always be that action. If we were desperate to solve the problems we've been talking about by the end of this podcast, we wouldn't have had the richness of the conversation.
No, we wouldn't.
So that, for us, if this was now a practical work environment, we'd be going, okay, well, the action for us is we need to go away and start talking to people about what works for them. We need to start talking to them about, are they clear on the vision and the mission of the organization?
Yeah.
Are they clear why we are asking for things? Are we clear on why we're asking for these things? Or are we just asking for them because someone said? Yeah. That's the action, and we'll come back and we'll talk about that.
Sounds a bit like L&D, does that, Rob?
Well, there you go. or we could just do a course. Let's do a course. Yeah. Let's do an e-learning telling everyone why we have to work from the office again. Then everyone will.
Don't give anybody any ideas who's listening to this podcast.
Here, David James, we've just set up an e-learning to get everyone working again. Do you agree that this will work? On that note, I'll tag him into it.
You'll find that very amusing.
Cool. All right, mate. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and no doubt we'll be speaking again soon.
We will. Take care.
Right, mate. Bye now.
Bye.
And that's it for this episode of the Leadership Untitled podcast. This episode is called What is Work? My thanks again to Mike for coming along today, and also for everyone out there listening for your time in listening to the episodes. Have a great day, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Bye now.